which is I would say you're a revolutionary, because you have to be, and I'm a progressive evolutionary, because I have to be. And I think that's, to me, is the whole theme of DeFi, future fine, all that, is that you need both sides. You need some people to be saying, look, there's an entirely different model, a different way of doing business that will be materially decentralized at some point in the future, and you need the visionaries and you need people with the funding and the wherewithal to do that. And that's Jeremy and Joe in ConsenSys and that whole team. Now, you also need very pragmatic people like DrumG, which is the company that I run, where we're working with the banks now, trying to kind of chip away at their current infrastructure without freaking them out, which happens. And somewhere in the middle we meet, and therein lies the new decentralized future, and it's a happy, wonderful, glorious, better for the world place, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tim, you often say there will not be crypto financial services and fiat financial services. There has been and will always only be financial services. Now, what's interesting is the more radical DeFi of the space is starting to offer some services that people actually use, like DAI, right? And previously, we're going to see a comeback of token launches. We're going to see the evolution of STOs, and we're going to see these much more massively decentralized, peer-to-peer, crowd-based techniques. And so I think we are going to see that. The other thing that we're seeing is some of the more radically decentralized approaches being used within the institutions. Exactly. I mean, do you want to quote the comment on Bloomberg that one of your clients once had recently?
What was that? Yeah.
We're sick of selling our data to Bloomberg just so they can...
Yeah, no, it was a managing director at a very prominent investment bank that starts with a G and ends with Goldman Sachs. And this excellent gentleman said, "We want our data back." And he banged on the table in this steering committee of like 10 of the biggest banks in the world. And it was quite an odd moment for sort of that outburst of emotion. But what was he really saying is like, I'm really sick of the financial service industry giving, this is going to sound very familiar, by the way, to all of us, Facebook, of giving institutions data and then they monetize it. And they sell it on, and they use it, and I have no ownership of it whatsoever. And it's funny that the Facebook thing has entered into our all collective consciousness, so we all give a shit now about our data being stolen.
Who saw
the thing flying around? Yeah, Zuck Facebook. And so the fact that it has now gone into the collective consciousness of the biggest banks in the world who are worried about pricing data on their trillions of dollars of assets that are flying around the system, which will all be tokenized eventually. Sure, totally buy that. But the same thing, it's like, it's just a financial services, whatever way you like it. But the issue, that what we're allowed to do with Enterprise Ethereum, as an example, is give Goldman Sachs and all the other banks ownership of their data back. That's a new model. That's a partially decentralized future that we in DrumG are building now and will deploy this year. So we're actually on our way. But the other exciting end of it is the really future stuff that sort of meets us in the middle,
I think this is a brilliant and salutary lesson in how blockchain communicates to an audience. I asked the question, what is a revolution? And these two bugger off on some tangent about what if Enterprise Ethereum is doing right now. So I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to say in 1789 and in 1776, 1848, 1917, 1949, what is the common denominator in those years? What is a revolution?
It's a restructuring of the economy, right? I mean, that really, that's what the big drivers have been. It's been economic restructuring, and it's, I mean, I'm sure there are many fans of Fight Club in the room, right?
And Mr. Robot.
Yeah, right. I mean, but that's what it is, and what a lot of people got into this space because of Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin was two things. It was an incredibly impressive computer science experiment, but it was also a response to the financial crisis, right? And and one that resonated very deeply with people. I mean, I think we all want Bitcoin to succeed. I think we all want Ethereum to succeed on a very passionate and personal level. I mean, how many people have sent money to a family member to pay for something between their checking account and their savings account, or their brokerage account and their checking account, and have no idea where their money is, right? Like, how many people in this audience have been through that process, right? And how many people found that a pleasant experience, right? It's a horrible experience. Like, it's my money. Like, I can only take out $500, like, WTF, right? And so there's been this, so 2008, and the Bitcoin white paper was to some degree a ferment of revolution, for sure. And what's happened since we've come into this, and this unfortunately expands this far beyond finance, is we've realized that the networks that our society are built on are simply insecure. Not only are the networks technically insecure, the institutions that have created these data monopolies on top of them are fallible human institutions that are rent-seeking and not fulfilling their social contract. And so it's time to give the internet an upgrade, right? And that's fundamentally the mission and the journey we're on. It's much broader. And so when we think about decentralized finance at ConsenSys, we think about a stack, and a stack that eventually decentralizes and tokenizes the entire $80 trillion global economy. Right? And it starts by producing the rails and tools that ushers in Web3, making Ethereum scalable, making it easy to program, making it easy to adopt, providing the end user tools, providing the key management. We believe deeply in an interledger world, so we work very strongly on interoperability with other protocols, but we also believe that right now Ethereum is the leading candidate to be the interoperability layer and to be the base layer of the next version of the internet, right? So we focus a lot of resources on that. The next layer of the stack, we think, is the DeFi layer, and we look at both parts of it. We look at the traditional legacy fiat world, and we look at the crypto world. And we think both are equally important, and we spend our efforts about 50-50 on each of them. And so the reason why is, financial services is roughly a quarter of the global economy, right? It's 18 trillion out of 80 trillion. But it's much more important than that, because it's what provides the investment capital to build new businesses. It provides the rails for exchanging value. So the economic impact of robust financial services is a multiple of its GDP input, right? And when you don't have access to financial services, you have, despite the fact that they've totally warped the American economy and wealth creation in America, right? Like, there's all these articles, if you get rich, the best way to get rich in America right now is for two junior bankers to marry each other, right? I'm serious. Check it on Business Insider. There's tons of data on this, right? So you get that distortion, but what you also have is when you don't have access to capital, and you don't have fluid movements of capital, and you don't have secure payments, and you don't have secure value transfers, and you don't have secure ways of exchanging title and actually buying and selling stuff, your economy's stagnant, right? So there's 2 billion people out there who do not have access to the global financial to financial services in any meaningful way, right? And so building the DeFi layer of the Web3 stack is critical to transforming the global economy. Now, on the more traditional side, if you want to change the world, you have to change all of it, right? And so we have this debate inside of ConsenSys all the time between what is our mission in terms of changing the world, right? And I'm a big champion of the expression, if you want to change the world, you have to change all of it. And that means you do need to work with incumbents, because that's where a lot of the problems are, and that's where a lot of the problems are that we need to fix. And so we look at this finance layer through 2 lenses: the lens of supporting projects like DrumG and Adhara and Comgo and a whole series of other projects that we support in the ecosystem that are some of the largest enterprise banking blockchain networks in the world. And also, what should we be doing with DAI? What should we be doing with Circle? Which bits of the DeFi stack do we want to own? What don't we want to own? How are we going to do security tokens, et cetera, right? And we treat them both as first-class citizens.
So, that was well said, man.
Thank you, Tim.
No, really, that's fucking really impressive. So you get right back to your question. To be fair, we did just bollock on about something else for a while.
We will continue to do that,
and probably
as well.
we'll keep doing that until someone just calls and we go to the pub instead. Now, what is a revolution? So you just made the case for a revolution. right? You need with like nobody's here in this place right now because I suspect because they don't believe that a revolution is needed. And I think that's been, that's an 11, 12-year process that is now getting into a bigger collective consciousness. So let's all just agree that we need one, if we may. Are we all there on that? Right, go. Let's do it. Now, Jeremy also went there, but like the big question is, well, how? Like, how are we going to do it? What is a revolution? How long does it take? When do you know it's right? Revolution's done now. We've had a revolution. When do you call the revolution start, the middle, the end? And the issue is much harder. And the issue, we'll go back to a statement I've made on stage a whole bunch of times, which is, you can start a disruptive, revolutionary play in an industry like media from a garage in Palo Alto and change the world. You can't do that in financial services because the level of scrutiny, jurisdictional differences, regulation, and compliance are such that you'll just go to jail if you tried and do it that way. And that's a fact, and that's why we haven't seen the same thing happen. So recognizing that means you've got to go about it in a very different way, and I think Jeremy said it well. We're both kind of saying the same thing. You've got to attack it from all angles. And so how long will this revolution take? Will it ever really be done? Yeah, maybe at one point we'll call it and say, in 50 years we'll go look back and say by, 2023 the revolution was done. I don't know. But what's the true measure of success? It's the extent to which things genuinely change, right? That's the measure of success, not how much it's decentralized or not. That's a means to an end, not the end itself. So the debate that I think nobody really knows the answer to is the revolution to what end? What's the point at which we all go, yes, that's now changed for the better? My man has an answer, and I want to hear it.
So I think our answer at ConsenSys is pretty ingrained in our mission, and we believe that the network effects of technology have concentrated wealth creation, and one of the sociological benefits of decentralization is fairer income distribution. And we believe that these decentralized tokenized networks will facilitate that, and it will facilitate it in multiple ways. One is it'll provide access to new products and opportunities and value creation and value participation for many more people. But two, by creating new forms of fundraising and new ways of interconnecting and a lower barrier to entry to global commerce, we will enable a great number of global entrepreneurs to build businesses more cost effectively and faster. So I invested in a non-bank bank that will be launching shortly. It's a ConsenSys portfolio company, and ConsenSys spoke. It offers a 3% interest checking account and a 9% interest credit card. The entire back end is built in Ethereum. Every single cash flow of every single account is tokenized and can be recombined into real-time securitizations. That application was built in 4 months, and it'll be launching with a debit card very, very shortly, right? And it was built that quickly because they had Ethereum, because they had a global financial backbone with built-in security, built-in accounts, built-in monetization, and it was built very, very cheaply, right? And it's going to offer a phenomenally good service. And if we can lower the barrier of entry for building these types of products globally, right, all of a sudden we're going to be able to provide access to the global economy for people who were never able to before. And that's going to have enormous and profound effects on the economy. So if we're able to, which is going to create more inclusion and better income equality and better income distribution. So we think that this can really help the world in 2 different ways. One is by lowering the barrier to access to capital and to integrating individuals and small businesses into the global economy. And second is by building networks where, the problem with technology is every time a person joins Facebook, Facebook becomes more valuable, right? Right? Except if you're a participant in Facebook, you don't get any of that, right? And so we need to rewire that in such a way that the sovereignty of the property is held by the people who create the value, right? Is there a question?
First off, I appreciate y'all energy. I particularly appreciated your data-driven approach to that answer. And you mentioned the $81 trillion global economy. In my experience, our GDP in America is supposed to be $19 trillion annually, but blacks have 1/100, wealth is whites. income distribution is skewed, men and women. There are just so many disparities that indicate that the true metrics of our economy globally is more in the quadrillions than it would be in terms of this 80 to 100 trillion intentionally suppressed system. So what I do, my cross is democratizing access to venture capital, to business development, and creating inclusive and diverse wealth. And I'm just amazed to hear the level of integrity from what you guys are approaching it. But I will also want to say, how can you engage with the communities I represent? Because quite frankly, I just feel like that revolution is Wall Street, Hollywood, Silicon Valley, Wall Street, finance, technology, culture, and finance, technology, culture, and the laws from which the social contract that you refer to that we're all obliging to. And I think that people like President Trump or Mr. Bezos understand that, but they're not necessarily 10 toes on the ground with the rest of us. So I would just like to know, like, who specifically do I need to talk to that's got 10 toes on the ground and that's adamant about creating an intersection of those 4 pillars of power in order to facilitate that quadrillion-dollar, multi-billion human, multi-trillion solar economic impact.
Is Robert Keenan around? So we have quite a large social impact practice. So it's interesting. Social impact at ConsenSys has had an interesting journey. We built a social impact practice, and then we sort of dismantled it, which was really controversial. The reason why we dismantled it is because we said putting social impact into a practice means that we don't care about it enough, and we need to put social impact into every part of our operation, not into a siloed pillar, right? Which was also controversial for the people who built the pillar, who said no, so there was been a lot of debate. But Robert Keenan's here. We have a lot of people that focus on this. We sponsor Black Girls Code. We sponsor a bunch of other social outreach initiatives around this. But I think our hope is, ConsenSys as an actor certainly does, I think, as much as we can to engage with other communities that we want to provide access to. But part of the answer also is by making the tools easy, right? So if we make the tools easy, if we make user access easy, if we make the coding tools easy, if our academy puts out free content on Coursera, which it already does, right, we're lowering the bar, and we're lowering the bar quite radically, and I think that's the other answer, right? So I think there's a proactive sort of how do we reach out into communities and help boost and empower and enable. Then I think there's another part of just if we make it easier for everyone, then we should get more access as well.
Over to you, John.
Yeah, but we do have people for you to talk to, and you can see me afterwards.
Well, no, I mean, I think the what you're doing now is you're answering the why, not just the what. What is the point of a decentralized finance revolution? If we agree we need a revolution, if we agree we're in the process of having that revolution, if we agree that, as our friend over here points out, there is inequity in the system, who is it we're railing against, and what are those people going to do when they find out that the revolution is 2/3 of the way done?
Well, we've hired many of the best ones, right? So we have an awful number of...
Give them money.
We have quite a few. So we have hired the head of blockchain from UBS. The head of blockchain of UBS was replacement. The head of blockchain of BNY. The head of blockchain of Santander. Tim... R3's lab. I mean, a lot of the people that are working on this stuff in the banks find the openness of Ethereum and go, this is so much fairer, this is so much better than what my company's doing, and then they run away and they join us, and so we have the floodgates are open, and it's pretty remarkable what happens, right? Like it's pretty remarkable a movement, and one of the reasons why we're here and the reason why we engage in this forum and we do events like this, and not just here, but we're at Davos. We were at Cybos. Where else were we, Tim?
Where have we not been?
Burning Man.
We've been everywhere.
Is because it is a movement, right? As much as a technology.
Well, I love that this is what we're talking about, because wouldn't it be a dreadful bore if we sat here and just talked about fucking protocols and decentralization, even as a thing? Whatever. What really, and wouldn't it be boring if as CEO of my company, all I talked about was the need to generate profits for the shareholders. There's
Tim,
obviously
you need to generate profits for the shareholders.
obviously present company accepted. That's a big part of our mission. But look, your question is well taken. And look, why? We're all saying our own why, and I think that as a community, I was coming online, no pun intended, when the internet was coming online, right? As an individual, as a person, I was born in 1975, so by
good year, by the way.
It was a great vintage, and that year I wasn't conscious enough as a grown up or as a business professional to really have a view on why the internet was important. But I'm going to go ahead and say that this cultural change that has happened since the late 90s to today, in no small part driven by this extraordinary group of you called the millennials, who are such a very odd group, but like love your work. And yeah, I mean, it's the main reason why I'm wearing such fantastic socks. And the difference is, I don't think we were really talking. It was much more capitalistic back then. We weren't really talking about the way in which the internet's going to change the world for good. I think some people were.
I disagree with that.
I think some of it, but it wasn't really the thrust. But I do think that the thrust of the sort of decentralized community in the blockchain community is to make things better at its core. And I don't think it's just consensus. I think it's actually in a general rule. Even those people in those big bad banks all know the game's up.
Yeah.
And that it's going somewhere else, and that they want it to go somewhere else because they want their kids to be in a world that is all the things we just described that need to be fixed or need to happen. That's an extraordinary change. That is the core of why we're doing it. We do talk, just like in ConsenSys, and I think most of the companies in this space do this. We talk about at DrumG why we do this. And for me, everyone has their own story. Mine is harmony, which might sound like tree huggy, and that I might have to go and smoke some of the good stuff. But you know what? The harmony between governments, corporations, and individuals, and how information flows, and equality, and prosperity, and a better place for our kids, that's what I mean. And everybody has a part to play, and the decentralized component is a big part of it. So that's why. That would be my sort of core. And I think a lot of people agree with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. How much time do we have, by the way? Yeah,
I got one more quick thing just to go back to. Tim, earlier you said we won't know when that revolution is done, right? But I think if we have a why and if we have a how, then we should probably at some point have a what. What is it that we see? Whether it be in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, what does the decentralized finance revolution actually achieve?
Permissionless participation in the global economy.
For
everybody.
So we're talking about including 2 billion new people into the world economy who are currently essentially excluded because of their lack of access to banking
We believe
services.
the revolution is done when the entire economy is tokenized.
So when we talk about a revolution,
revolution will be tokenized.
Right. So we've got 5.5 billion people on the planet who do have some access to banking services and the world economy through those services.
But don't have access to the best investments in the world, don't have access to early stage venture capital, don't have access to low cost international payments.
Sure, but they're included in some way.
Yep.
And then we're talking about literally adding 25% almost, more than that, 30% almost of the world's population to the global economy. What does that result in 10 years?
I don't think it's possible to guess the limits of human ingenuity. I think if we empower 25% of the world that's been disempowered for a long period of time, I don't know if we even have the cultural and social economic references to imagine what those individuals will achieve, right? I mean, one of the beauties of traveling and participating in such a diverse community around the world is you see how different people do things very, very differently, right? I mean, we had a team in Ghana quite recently. We have teams in South Africa. We've had teams in Mauritius. We've had teams, in lots of places around the world. We've got teams in South America. I don't think we can. I don't think we know. I don't think we can tell what different value systems are out there and how those will be manifested into this technology.
for instance, if I'd sat here and told all of you in 1997 that one day you will have a device in your pocket that will allow you to walk outside of here right now, get on a scooter, and scoot...
Not into an Uber.
And scoot to your next destination as the ultimate and very extraordinary, like all the steps that it took to get to the point for me to be able to say that that's happening is mind-boggling for someone in 1997. You would have all probably thought I was a bit bonkers.
He was.
And thrown rotten tomatoes at me. And you may still think that, but that's not my point. I'm really backing up the point that Jeremy's making. Is like, well, I don't know 10 years from now, but I do know that if we hit it hard and we have the right spirit about what we're trying to do, which I think we're broadly in agreement here, and it's governments and it's corporations and individuals, it's not one or the other, it's just all of the above. We're all bound up in the same systems, and it's global and it's borderless. There'll be really interesting things in 20 years' time that some panelists are going to make the same point.
So can I pick up on something you said there that you and I have talked about in the past? So today there is no global financial system, right? Like, this may come across as a heretical statement, but I worked in the bowels of the capital markets, in the big vampire squid in the sky. And the reality of the global economy today is financial markets are regional, right? The way you issue a share in New York is different than the way you issue a share in London, right? Buying a share in New York from London has a whole bunch of steps in it, right? So we really do not have a global financial system. We have regionalized financial systems, and in the U.S., in fact, it's regulated down to the state level for things like payments, right? And so, as a result, the global financial network really has these routers that interconnect a series of non-interoperable networks. And these routers are investment banks and global law firms. And they effectively arbitrage the lack of interoperability between the regional protocols for rent seeking, right? And that is how the global financial system is wired today. I mean, it just is. Which is why a global financial transaction can cost up to 10% of the invested capital, right? Which is insane, right? And so with Ethereum, for the first time, we have a global, real-time, trustable depository substrate for the planet, right? Anyone can put an asset on it. Anyone can buy an asset safely, real-time, and basically for free. And that is a very, very radical thing. And it's something that when we talk about finance is unique to Ethereum. Despite some of the great work that some of the private protocol competitors are doing in enterprise work, none of them have a global permissionless depository layer, which really is where all this needs to go to, right? And so I think the profound impact of this is still really, really, really early days, right? Just how meaningful it is to have a real-time, trustable, free, permissionless depository system for any sort of arbitrarily complex asset, right?
Can I add a little quick one? Just a comment that one of our advisors, the great Professor Gordon Hewitt, Hewitism, who said a few months ago, he said, value will be derived at the intersection of previously walled gardens, which is another way of saying what you said, which is that, in my little simple scooter out there story, that there's a bunch of things had to happen which previously were seen as completely and utterly separate, and now that they've been combined in some sort of chain, they create a better outcome. This is such a simple example, but it's quite powerful. But the ultimate expression of the walled gardens coming down, the ability for business protocols and personal protocols and social contracts and all these different strata of things that need to work together to be combined consistently, organically, in control of the people, for the people. Holy crap, this sounds great. Someone's better be recording this. That's where it's at, right? That's what this is all about. The value for society at the intersection of previously walled gardens. And that's really the story of history. If you go back to your revolutions, every time crashing through a revolution.
Can we have a quick poll first? Which shoes are more appropriate for the revolution?